Hello, this is Morphing Jars again, back with another update for the Libromancer Invoked deck profile. So I took this build that I talked about in my last video to my locals last night, and it performed pretty well as I was expecting it to for a first build of a deck. I didn't top or anything, but I did almost take several rounds off of some meta decks like Invoked Untitled Chapter or in the Sword Soul deck. I almost took one against them too, which I was really impressed with. But I did make some changes compared to the last build, so I'll just run through the build again, and then at the end I will talk about the side deck a bit too, which I think will be exciting. So let's get into that. So to begin, we've got 3 copies of Libromancer First Appearance, of course. I really liked how this card performed, and I'm really happy to have it at 3 because very often you'll you'll activate a copy of it on top of another card to be able to get the activation effect. It does suck that you're limited to cards that aren't on the field, but it's still pretty good. And so very often I burn through 3 of them, and you want to see it in every single hand pretty much, so or a way to get to it. So it's definitely worth playing it at 3. Next is the Libromancer Geek Boy. I mean, you have to play the Geek Boy. It's really good, but honestly, it could be better. Maybe if there's another Libromancer spell in the future, it'll be better. And it kind of sucks that it only triggers on special summon, but it didn't end up really being a problem at all yesterday. So, yeah, so 3 of that, of course. You need the material. Next, we have Libromancer Agent at 3 copies. This card was really good. Every single time I saw it in my hand, I was happy to have it. Throws itself out as a body, and then it helps you cycle back your Libromancer cards for a longer grind game. So, I was really impressed with this card. Definitely played it 3. Next, we have Doombroker. As predicted, having Agent and Doombroker in any hand was just, you love to see it. And then having 3 more still useful cards after that was even better. I don't think there was a time in which I had Doombroker in my hand and then didn't like it, like it wasn't a good hand. So I might explore ways in the future of getting to Doombroker even faster, like maybe like the Preparation of Rites or something like that. It would be nice if there was a spell a ritual spell that specifically listed Doombroker or like a Libromancer spell or something like that, so that it could be searched with pre-prep of rights. But then we have 2 Libromancer Firestarter. This felt like the correct ratio because oftentimes when I had it in my hands, it wasn't useful. We still want to play 5 ritual monsters so that we can have enough names to be able to special summon our Libromancer cards and trigger their effects to be able to search for more Libromancer cards, right? But it wasn't that useful. There was some times when it was like hard to get over sitting on the field, and it caused my opponent to use more resources than they might otherwise, and so that was good. But all in all, not that impactful. And then again, 2 copies of Libromancer Intervention. It seemed like the perfect amount. I usually use 2 copies per game. And then if I needed more, I could just activate the Agent ability, just add it to my hand, and then immediately put it on the bottom of the deck so that Doombroker could bring it back out again, turn on turn, and not lose any card advantage by having to bottom a card from my deck. And so that was good. It was very nice. This card is the reason to play the deck. It's really good. It keeps people off guard. It didn't ever come up that it's not a counter trap. I even played some control matchups like against Eldritch and Dogmatic Invoked Shadal, and it never came up that it wasn't a counter trap. So I think it's not necessarily as much of a weakness as I thought it might be. The next card that we have for the profile is Emergency Teleport. This card is really good. When you saw it in your hand, it was always a positive, always made every hand better. So I think playing it at 3 is correct. I mean, it's unbanned. We might as well play it at 3. And it's nice because sometimes people ash it, and so it attracts ash blossoms, and it helps the rest of the turn go a little smoother. But I don't know in what situation you would it would be correct to ash an Emergency Teleport, because every other deck that plays E-Tele, it's not correct. For example, in Sword Soul, you want to ash the Foxy Tune. Maybe, but even against like a Virtual World, it's not very good. So I don't know why you would ash it, but it does attract ashes sometimes. So, and it's not a once per turn anyway, so it doesn't matter if it is ashed. Next, we have the Invoked package. Now, so the Invoked package, it was more theory crafted. Its inclusion that it would be good, but last night it really put in a lot of work. Not only does it give the deck like some sort of staying power, and it helps to establish a board so that, well, one, you don't get nibbed, which would suck in a control deck getting nibbed, right? You can't. There's like no playing through a nib if you do get nibbed, so it helps with that. It also helps give you a lot of like OTK power, like going into a Gordy's, but it also has a utility aspect because you can banish monsters from your opponent's graveyards that they might need for, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, so we played 3 Alistair, 3 Magical Meltdown, 2 Invocation. This was great. One time I even opened, I was playing against a Floowandereeze player during my first round, and I opened Invocation, Geek Boy, and the Alistair, so I was able to play through the Wind Barrier lock, which is really, I mean, a really lucky opening, but things like that make this package basically an auto include. And then we have now the Fusion Destiny package, 2 Fusion Destinies, Celestial, and a Dasher. I talked more with some other people about whether or not Plasma is better than Dasher, because I know in my last episode I mentioned that it's probably it's worth playing Dasher over Plasma, but I don't know if it would really matter that much, because if you drew an Alistair, you wouldn't want to Dasher summon it because it doesn't trigger on special summon, and then also the Geek Boy and stuff, like the Geek Boy technically triggers on special summon, but you can also just use Geek Boy's effect by itself to special summon itself. So I think Plasma's pretty good in the situation. I had 2 games, not yesterday, but since I've made the last video, where I've actually made Plasma, and it's been really useful. So Plasma might actually be the include here. So there's DPE. We then play the Terraforming packet, or we play Terraforming and Called By for our staples. So now we're moving into the staples part of the video. Called By was pretty good. It just hits Ash, there's a reason it's limited to 1. You should play it. Same thing with Terraforming. There can be only 1 and 2 here. So in my profile I had it at 2, but then at locals I played it at 3, and that was really nice. It was very useful, but there was some like niche issues with it, so I decided to bump it down to leave it at 2 versus what I played with yesterday. Also, for Dogmatic Punishments, I took them out of the build because there was multiple times in which I bricked on them, unfortunately. Like, I was just playing, I drew 2 hands, 2 or 3 hands, like 2 or 3 games where I drew 2 Dogmatic Punishments, and it felt really bad. So I took them out, and I reworked differently, the trap lineup differently. So I have the 2 TCBOs. I have Ice Dragon's Prison, which, like, super overperformed because there was multiple times where, like, for example, I played one of my last rounds against King of the Skull Servants, which is, if you ever played against it, kind of a scary deck, especially for control matchups, because sometimes if you just burn your resources, they can just play through it and then just OTK you by dumping cards into the grave. And so Ice Dragon's Prison helped because I banished 2 King of the Skull Servants. It's also Dragoon out in deck, which is really nice. Also, it just helps make a lot of matchups easier, and it's like a power trap that you can just set on the field to back up your Makaba and your Doombroker. So I really liked Ice Dragon Prison here. Definitely at 2 though, because at 3 it's a little bricky. Next, I had 3 copies of Solemn Strike. So in my profile, I actually played last night at the tournament. I played different cards here, but in my profile instead, I played Imperm, which was not, in testing, it wasn't super reliable, and having the hand trap was nice, but it wasn't as impactful as I wanted it to be. It just wasn't very good card advantage wise. You ended up like trading 1 for 1, which in a control deck you want to be trading multiple for 1. So I decided to put I'm testing Solemn Strike. I didn't have it in, so I have a testing event tomorrow, and I will test Solemn Strike. So hopefully that goes good. But I'm going to be playing with that. So I'm putting it in my next version of the profile that I'm publishing to you now. So that's it for the main deck. Now we're going into the extra deck, and there's one big change at the start of the extra deck. So because I'm taking the Dogmatic Punishments out, I'm cutting down the Dogmatic Punishment package from 2 Entis, 1 Wind Pegasus, 1 Omega, as it was in my last profile, to just Entis and Omega, because you can use Entis to obviously destroy things that you don't have a target for, or just like a back row or anything. It's really useful, especially if like your opponent Maximuses you, then you have the Entis. And then the Omega can help you shuffle back the Entis if you want to use it again, or shuffle back your opponent's DPE or your opponent's other card in the graveyard, or even your own card if you want to put a card in the deck. So I think it's worth a place in the deck. Next we have Artemis. So in my profile I had Artemis and Secure Garden on, and Almirage, all three of those like ones together in the extra deck. But then when I was playing at the tournament yesterday, I cut Secure Gardener and Almirage out in favor of in favor of some other cards later in the extra deck. But I found, and it's part of like a niche combo where you can go into Verte and Makaba pretty reliably, so that you don't have like a Geek Boy hanging around. But I found that if I was under TCBO, obviously I can't go into Artemis because Alistair and Artemis are both spellcasters, and you still need the light. And so I found that as we do main deck TCBO, it is worth playing the Almirage and the Secure Gardener, as I had initially stated. So I would leave it like that. Next is the copies. Let me grab them here. The Predaplant Verte Anaconda and the Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. These put in a lot of work. They're amazing at this point. Most control decks should be playing it. It just helps you go up on card advantage much more reliably. And it makes it okay if, like, for example, a trap just becomes a 2-for-1 because your DPE is going to be like a 6-for-1 over the course of the game. Or it requires a lot of resources to be answered. Namor Unicorn and Access Code Talker. I don't think I used this during the tournament specifically, but in testing before the tournament, it was really good, and it's just an excellent little package there. For my extra Invoked monsters, I played Purgatrio, Agordes, and Raijin. Raijin, as already discussed, is really good in the Flunderies matchup. Purgatrio is really good for OTKing, and with the Almirage, it's even better. In the extra deck, you can make it more reliably. And then Agordes is just good to put a lot of like OTK pressure and like turn after turn popping of monsters, which slows down your opponent. Additionally, I have the 2 Makabas, of course, pretty standard, and that actually worked out perfectly. And then my last minute inclusion to the extra deck was Invoked Kaliga. I wanted to put Kaliga in because I was testing it with some of my friends who are also playing DPE, and Kaliga is really good as just to have a target in the extra deck to be able to make by banishing your opponent's DPE, which is pretty good. So that's the extra deck. Now we're going to the side deck. I didn't talk about this before, but I put together a side deck before the event, and it actually worked really well. So I had 2 Godarlas and 1 Dino Wrestler Pankotops. The logic behind this is that the Godarlas were meant to be like a Dragoon out or a Wind Barrier statue out or something like that. And then the Pankotops was meant to be something that you could side in going second to be able to just like pop your opponent's floodgates if they flip like a summon limit on you or something like that. Or you can use it to out an Inspector border, which ended up happening during the tournament, or a barrier statue, which is really nice. Also, worst comes to worst, it's a 2600 body that can destroy a card or be tributed for a Doombroker or something like that, and it throws itself onto the field, so it's very convenient in that way. I cited this in multiple times, and I was really happy with the performance, so I think I'm going to keep this in for the next. Next was Lancia. Lancia was also really good and consistent. I think every deck I'm going to play in this format is going to have this in the side deck because it just hits so many decks in such a crucial way, and it's a light, especially for this deck, so it's good to be banished off of Invocation for Makaba, which is convenient. And it really helps with the mirror match, too. Dimensional Barrier is very good into the Sword Soul matchup. You can just hit them on the token with Synchro, and I really liked that, especially going first. Going second, I probably would not have put it in, and I didn't. Against Dogmatic Invoke Shadal, it's actually a pretty good top deck, even if you don't have much resources, because if they're trying to get Makaba on the field, you can just flip it when they go to do Invocation, and then they just lose their Alistair loop, which is pretty insane. Because their Alistair gets stuck in the graveyard, the Invocation is stuck in the graveyard, there's not much they can do. Of course, unless they top deck a Magical Meltdown, which they always do. But in theory, it's a really good card, and it did perform very well yesterday. Cosmic Cyclone, kind of, the Mystic Mind tax, you have to play Cosmic Cyclone or some sort of back removal. I was having a discussion with some of my friends at locals about whether or not to play Twin Twisters. It is an interesting prospect because you do kind of want to hit at least 2 floodgates each turn, or have your card hit 2 floodgates, because you can hit like a skill drain in a summon limit, or a skill drain in a Gozen match that a deck like Eldritch puts up, or True Draco, or even this deck, for example. But I think in a control deck like this, you just don't have the extra card advantage to be able to throw one away to destroy your opponent's cards, and you go -2, or I guess about equal if you're destroying 2 cards with it. And that being said, I still think Cosmic Cyclone is better for its utility in banishing cards and also not making you go minus in card advantage. And then my last 3 cards in the side deck were Dark Ruler No More. And to be honest, I was quite disappointed with its performance, and there wasn't really any situation in which I was going to side it in, no matchups. Be that as it may, my locals is very control focused, So I think that might be part of it. And if you have a really combo or like build a board locals, like a lot of PK players, Dark Lunomore is probably really good into that matchup, especially as a control deck. But I didn't like it, so I'm going to be taking out and replacing it with. I have several options. The first of which is Alpha, the Master of Beasts. This can be also another Dragoon out, and it's really good to just throw on the board. And worst comes to worst, it's a big body to ritual summon, but it can also help out non-targeting bounce monsters, and then or just non-targeting, or just summon and then attack as well, right? The other option potentially is Nibiru. I really like Nibiru in this deck because it's a light, which is just normal like invoked wisdom, right? They play lights and dark hand traps all the time, or lights and fires rather. But it also helps. It's a big body. It's a hand trap that puts a big body on your field for you to ritual summon with. It helps clear your opponent's board, which is a problem this deck has. Even if it dark rulers, it's really hard for it to clear an entire board of monsters. So having the Nibiru is nice. The unfortunate thing is in this format, like one hand trap usually isn't enough, so it's not the best hand trap, but it is pretty good. So then the other third option is evenly matched, which is I think what I'm going to go with once I get my evenly matched back. Someone else is using them right now. And that could be very helpful to like clear both front and back row, because this deck doesn't really have a great destruction engine either way, front or back row. It's more about stopping your opponent. And so I think evenly matched is going to be the go-to, because you don't need your battle phase for the deck, obviously. You're not going to be OTKing. So yeah, so that's my current build. If you guys want to know more about the side deck theory, if you want to see some combo videos, if you want to know about the extra deck, or maybe even just some more speculation on what new cards this archetype needs, or other supplementary engines that could be used, make sure you throw a follow my way, or subscribe my way, and like the video. I hope you enjoyed it, this little update, and come back for more. Oh, and if you've been playing the deck, or you have any comments or constructive criticisms, I'd love to hear them. I'm always trying to improve this build.